I can handle it.
I want geography specific. Like, ask them what's going on at the corner of somewhere and somewhere.
When was the last time he's had the club sandwich at the Hampton Junction?
Sorry, I'm just going.
Oh, sorry, didn't see you there. Sorry.
Why are you not doing something like George about all the traffic?
George should slow the traffic after a certain
I mean, for traffic. I mean, people not want cars, which is.
But this guy would take an Alberta economic crisis 52 weeks of the year.
Yeah,
The
no more.
Alberta economic crisis
Everything's
52 weeks
gonna
of the year. Cut his unemployment in half.
sing, the farmers, everything. The day is cancelled. Les fermiers, ben oui, forcément. Parce que
Well, let's go home. The day's
yeah, yeah, the day.
They want the pipeline. A huge chunk of rural Newfoundland works on that stuff, right?
Yeah.
There used to be direct flights from Deer Lake to Fort Mac. Those guys would go up for 3, back for 10 days. That's sort of the thing. It doesn't happen anymore. There was a big surge in the conservative vote in like Church Rogers' seat and Goody Hutchins' seat, and it's mostly disaffected oil patch workers who are now back home and angry about it.
How long's the flight?
Yeah.
How long's the flight?
The flight, I don't know. St. John's, Alberta.
Probably
8 hours? 7 hours?
yeah.
More. But yeah, because that's for the workforce.
Yeah. Comment?
Pourquoi ils ont fait courir?
Matt? PM strumming those to you?
In Hamilton? Yeah. Far away from all the cameras? Get a skirt on. He's in Montreal.
Well, last time we did something last week or
This guy on.
Friday. I think it was a 4-minute heads up.
Yeah, I know, it came out at 122 or something, and it was a 130 scrub, yeah.
Well, you won't be there.
Because we don't have our time machines yet, or our teleporters.
Oh, celle de Margarno la semaine dernière.
Ouais,
mais ils savaient déjà.
1h25.
Mais les gens, parce que moi, quand j'ai vu ça, j'ai appelé Montréal, puis je sais pas comment vous allez faire ça. Ils disent, oh non, on savait déjà, on a envoyé quelqu'un. Fait qu'ils ont dû comme appeler les gens qui couvraient.
Ouais, mais j'aime pas ça quand ils font ça parce que c'est pas parce que j'ai découvert.
Mais vous n'avez pas quelqu'un à Montréal qui faisait la TCM, ça? Je tourne ma langue dans ma bouche. Hey, on est correct pour Noël!
Hey, on n'aura pas de sapin.
Il y a des sapins un petit peu partout, ils sont très distraits.
We don't get the big Christmas tree for my boy.
The kids' Christmas party.
Where is it?
In the giant building, which is
Oh,
cool.
that's
It's
pretty.
nice, but bringing them up to the center block and around the Hall of Honor.
A couple of trees, ice trees.
It's not going to be as
Who
cool.
said that?
I'm not sure.
C'est Normand qui revient.
Hey, bring them.
Good morning. Good morning. It is.
Do you have a statement or should we just
You
ask
good?
you how it went?
Far away.
Did you have any specific demands and how were you received today by the Prime Minister?
We had a good meeting. Some progress has been made on some of the priorities for Newfoundland and Labrador. So the discussion was a broad discussion. We not only Newfoundland and Labrador issues, but certainly issues that impact and can have a benefit for all of Canada. But for me, the priority was on rate mitigation. Of course, most people that have followed Newfoundland and Labrador and seen the course that we're on for electricity rates, they're unsustainable. And these discussions have been ongoing since last April. We're making progress. And so right now it was the big number one priority for me this morning with the Prime Minister. So we're making progress. And right now, of course, we're heading towards in our province, we need to know, what options we have available to us by January of this year. But he's been committed. I think no one in this country would like to see, could understand for sure that electricity rates in any particular province for any of our citizens is just unsustainable.
Did he commit to the January timeline? Are you going to have a solution by then? I know finance is running this, but
Yes.
did he commit to that timeline?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what we're looking at is making sure that we have a bundle of options that would be available to us so that, that we can actually attain and have sustainable electricity rates within Newfoundland and Labrador. So this is where we are. A lot of work has been done. I mean, this project has been around quite some time. It's one that the Prime Minister himself inherited. It is one that I inherited. But nevertheless, we are the government of the day, and our responsibility is to get those rates under control. So right now, we're working towards that. But of course, the project itself is still not finished, and so it's incumbent on all of us to make sure, though, what options that we have available, so we can present to people, indeed, this is something that we can be successful
But the Public Utility Board process is going to take its next step in January. Will you have an answer by then? Does the Prime Minister commit to that?
Yeah, so what we want to have, by the end of January is the ability to be able to say to people in Newfoundland and Labrador that that rates will not be doubling in Newfoundland and Labrador. We can say that now, but how specifically we'll be able to drill down and say it'll be this option, hey, 1, 2, or 3, is we're not quite there yet. But certainly the commitment from the Prime Minister has been unwavering. It's been common throughout all of this that he will be there standing up for Newfoundland and Labrador so that rates will not be doubling in our province.
Does that come with the $200 million that you need from the federal government?
Pardon me?
Has he committed any real money, like a $200 million figure, which is what I believe you are looking for?
Well, first and foremost, this is really not about writing a check. This is within the financial structure that we have within our province. So identifying a number of options that would be available to us to put in place a rate mitigation program. So what all those options would be around the financial structure, I want to remind people that this is not about the federal government writing a check. This is about putting in place a mechanism within the financial structure that we can actually not see rates doubling in our province.
Did you get a commitment that it would be to the extent that you are hoping for?
I've had that commitment from the Prime Minister for quite some time. The support hasn't changed, and even the message today, we went into great detail of where we are and some of the progress that officials have been made, and so that is support for Newfoundland and Labrador has not changed.
Did you discuss pharmacare at all?
I did.
What is your
Well, anytime I get the opportunity to sit and meet with the Prime Minister or any officials for that matter, even my own premiers that we meet with, and we'll be meeting again on Monday, I want to make sure that pharmacare becomes a priority for all of us. We can see I have lots of experience in this field that right now we're seeing a growing demands on our pharmacare within our provinces right now, and I believe there's a role for the federal government to play in healthcare. In our particular province right now, it's less than 20% of federal involvement in the overall delivery of health care. I think this is an opportunity for us as Canadians. And, if they're looking for a pilot, if they're looking for a province to start and to run options on pharmacare, certainly in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're willing to explore those options with the federal government.
Do you think there's a consensus amongst provinces? You say you hope to talk about it on Monday with other premiers. Do you think, though, it's realistic to hope that they all agree on
Well, right now, I think the flavor and the tone at the table is that people want to have more information. What we don't want to see is, like we've seen in the past, where we've seen federal programs that would eventually, over time, be downloaded to the provinces. That's not something that we're interested in. We want to see a federal commitment on pharmacare, that commitment is sustainable and is there for the long term. And I think that's one of the fears that we see from other premiers. For me, it's where I want to be on all of this is I understand that right now the rising costs of pharmaceuticals within Canada right now is having a negative impact. If you look at my particular province as Newfoundland and Labrador, with an aging demographic, with chronic diseases, that are unprecedented when you compare it to some other provinces within Canada. So really, right now, we need more support from the federal government on pharmaceuticals and medications that they vitally need to control and maintain chronic disease management within their own homes. So it's important for me, it's important for all of Canada. I think we heard that loud and clear during the federal election as well.
But for some provinces, Quebec, for one, it's also a question of jurisdiction. So does that matter to you at all?
Absolutely, it matters.
Stepping into your jurisdiction.
Absolutely, it matters, because if you do not get the provincial buy-in, well, that is not. We want this to be successful. So if any particular province is, they're not really warmed up and cannot accept the concept of whatever that is, it's too early to tell quite yet. You need to have the provincial government buy-in. But I'm not going to hold back a program where I see significant benefits for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. I'm sure we can work this out, and I'm sure if there's a way to reduce drug costs for people that need those drugs, The responsibility of me as Premier is to actually have those discussions.
When you meet with the premiers next week in Toronto, are you willing to discuss changes to the equalization formula? That's something that some of the Western premiers have brought up.
For right now, I think we're picking the wrong target. One of the things that discussions that I would have with the premiers, and I had this morning with the Prime Minister, is we're picking the wrong target. I guess there's an old tone, and some of the advice that I've always gotten in negotiations: do not ask somebody for something that they can't give. So we understand that if we have, a bunch of provinces right now, 8 of them, and let's keep in mind that Newfoundland and Labrador is not a recipient of equalization. So right now, under the current discussions that we're having right now, we have 8 provinces that are receiving this. So essentially what we're saying is take from this one and give to someone like Newfoundland and Labrador. What we need is a bigger, broader discussion on how do we respond to the financial challenges that provinces like Newfoundland and Labrador, as a natural resource developing province, how do we respond to, be more flexible in putting in place a program. If it comes down to fiscal sustainability, that fund, that is one option. But what we need is a program that can respond to the needs of a province like Newfoundland and Labrador, like Alberta, and like Saskatchewan. And who knows, it could be some other province in the future, not just about equalization.
Doesn't that mean then changing the formula and looking at equalization? Because you're saying we're looking at the wrong target, or you said the wrong target, but you're also saying we should maybe look at how we can adjust better for provinces that are doing poorly in certain circumstances.
That's only if you want to talk about equalization. What I want to talk about is another program, another way. Fiscal stability fund is one option. Where we need to be as provinces is adding a fund. If it's fiscal stability fund, that's one option. We need to have some discussions on what the cap would look like. It would need a revamping. But what I get is that if you're a natural resource province right now and you find yourself meeting challenges like we have in Newfoundland and Labrador, there needs to be a discussion outside of equalization that could put in place a program that can support in a very flexible, responsive way to meet the challenges that we face within our province. As an example, Alberta would be there, and Saskatchewan could be there as well.
So you're similar to Premier Kenny in that, where he says this fiscal fund, which caps it at $60 per capita on transfer, doesn't come close to meeting the needs of Alberta with the revenue drop they've had. I think you benefited 2 years ago about $200 million or something, not even that?
Not even that.
So you lift the cap, put it at $60 per something, massage those criteria, but lift the cap so you can get extra cash.
Right. It needs to be rewritten. The criteria needs to change to be able to respond in a meaningful way. If you look at Newfoundland and Labrador and some of the challenges that we've been able to face simply because of natural resource oil price decline, as an example, we need to be able to have a fund that's not tied to equalization, but that can respond within the next year, and so we not see a province like Newfoundland and Labrador in the situation that we're in to actually have to borrow, even for our interests these days. That is not the Canadian model in making sure that we deliver reasonable services at reasonable costs for Canadians. I think the Prime Minister understands that. But rather than pick a fight with each other province and say, I want you to have less so we can have more, that's not the right conversation. For me, I think we can actually be responsible enough to put together a new program that reflects our needs.
But do you think Premier Kenny would find that sufficient?
What Premier Kenny, I'm speaking for Newfoundland and Labrador, I think it's a tough argument to argue against. I think it's much easier to be able to say, rather than fight amongst 8 other provinces, let's get all provinces to agree, because who knows? Some provinces in a year or two could be in the same situation that we are into today, and they might need another way to be able to respond to current situations that could occur at any time in their own province.
How much do you worry that this meeting of the Council of Federations will turn into some sort of family feud? And what do you hope to bring to this meeting to calm the anxiety that we're seeing out west and to make sure that everybody's back on the same page at some point?
What I will bring to the table will be this, is that we want to bring benefits to our own provinces. We want to bring benefits to all of Canadians. So we are fighting against ourselves. We're focusing the energy in the wrong place. We need to put the focus back on Canadians, back on Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, back on people that live in Saskatchewan, back on people that live in Alberta. And there's many ways of doing it. It could be around the fiscal stabilization fund. It could be around some things of natural resource development, which was also part of our discussion. Because in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have so many untapped resources that if the federal government is willing to work with us, and I believe they are, to unleash and monetize the value of those natural resources, that we could find ourselves in a better spot quite quickly. So on Sunday, I think the discussion, where we really need to be, is focusing on things that matter to Canadians. Let's talk about natural resource development. Let's talk about a new and a unique way to deliver transfers to provinces that need them and be able to do that responsibly. So there's a number of discussions, and of course I want to talk about
But do you think that Premier Moe and Premier Kennedy are on that same page as you are? Because it sounds like they're very content to wedge this and pit fights.
If the focus is on people that live in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador, rather than the Prime Minister, I think we can get there. I think if I can get in the room with Jason Kenney and have a good discussion on things that could actually bring value to his province, no different than Scott Moe and no different to my colleagues in Newfoundland and Labrador. Also, I believe that those provinces that are the recipients of equalization can support this as well. We do not want to see a divided Canada. We know how important this Canadian structure is, and right now I think, for me, the focus has got to be on how we bring benefit to all of Canada. I'm going to be working hard for Newfoundland and Labrador, of course, but I understand too that when we look at natural resource development, that if Alberta's doing well, Newfoundland and Labrador will do well, Saskatchewan will do well, and so therefore all of Canada will benefit. And I think all of the premiers get that.
Just back to Muskrat Falls and mitigation, the options you're talking about, you say if it's not about Canada writing a check, so you don't expect a $200 million annual check. Are you talking about like a restructuring of the mortgage, for lack of a better word, like extending out the amortization to reduce the annual payments as a way of keeping the rates down, those sorts of options?
Yeah, this is a big project. It's $12.7 billion, so there's a way, and it's a short-term. There's a short-term problem here too, because over time this thing sorts itself out. So right now we have to deal with some surplus electricity as an example. So what we need now is to be able to put those options on the table so that we can get the early wins in the short term, and that over the life of the project, some of the amortization and the value of these assets will be around in 75, 100 years. So we need this short-term fix now that could actually get us into long-term stability.
But so, are you going to have a complete finalized list of options by the end of January to show the people back home that it won't go from 12 cents a kilowatt hour to 20
and that is exactly what we're working on right now. Is we need a list of
commit to it.
He is willing to work with us making, and we have, there's so many officials now working on this on all those options that are available to us. So, we've spent months in gathering information in terms of what the restructuring would look like, and keep in mind the project itself is not finished, and there are still a few challenges that we're having to deal with. But we're down to, even if all those challenges, if all of that needed to change, the impact on the overall project would be very, very small anyway. So we're working our way through it. So right now we're still focused on what we can deliver near the end of January. The Public Utilities Board, as you know, David, they're concerned about this too, because they will have some work to do early in February if we don't deliver this. So right now I stand here with confidence today that having the support of the Prime Minister, and certainly as a province, they understand the significant impact this would have on our province.
Premier, while you were in the meeting, the Teamsters and CN Rail announced that they signed a deal to end the strike, and I wonder if you could just talk about what that might mean to the folks in Newfoundland and Labrador. So
the strike's over, you mean? Well, that's news. That's good news for me. I think all of us, when you have the movement of goods across this country, of course, we don't have a rail system in Newfoundland and Labrador, but many of the goods and services that end up in our province, gets to certain parts of the province with other provinces, by rail. So anytime you have, certainty in the delivery of goods, that has to be good news for all of the country.
But what do you think of all this talk of national unity or lack thereof?
The discussion is great to have, because, through the discussion we're going to realize that, when we get this right, that we're going to understand one more time as we take an inward look and analyze what we have here in the country. This is too good of a country to give up on, and I think that premiers across this country, regardless of where you are, we recognize that first and foremost. Now we've got to find a way to deal with some of the immediate challenges that we're facing, and given the Prime Minister, with the discussion that I had with him today, and giving the tone and tenor what I'm seeing in most premiers right now, we want to make sure that this country stays strong.
But some mayors who have come through here in the past weeks have said it's greatly exaggerated, and it's greatly exaggerated and maybe a bit political. Others have said, actually, no, it's that bad in Alberta and Saskatchewan. How do you, because you have an interesting perspective, having people who are affected with what's going on in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but being also far away geographically. So where do you sit on?
Well, we're very tightly connected to Alberta. Matter of fact, if you were living in Newfoundland and Labrador, you would say that our second largest city is Fort McMurray. So we have a very vested interest in the economy in Alberta as well. It contributes to not just Newfoundland and Labrador, but all of the country. So anytime any premier raises a concern about unity, well, I take that very seriously. It's not something that I want to ignore. So it's important to me to work with provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, work with them very closely, because we have a lot of similarities in Alberta and Newfoundland and Labrador. And so I want to make sure that I take these things seriously. As an example, I was one of the first premiers to come out and support the pipeline, which is an important discussion for me, even though to get our natural resources to market, we don't need a pipeline. We've got the Atlantic Ocean that does that for us. But it's important for me to make sure that Canada stays competitive globally, because any time that we're talking about being competitive globally, it has an impact on Newfoundland and Labrador. So if the discussion is unity and it's allowed in another province, I want to make sure that I lend my voice to that and make sure that we can find a mechanism to reunite Canadians, because it is a great country once.
How tough is it right?
Right now?
Pardon me?
Do you see a risk right now that this exacerbates?
I think anytime people are talking about it, it's a risk. I mean, as Newfoundland and Labrador, once the federal election was over, there was no question we saw feedback that would have come from other provinces, primarily around Alberta, about Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, a lot of these things were not based on facts, because you'd be almost led to believe that, we were down there and we were getting, a monthly check, from Alberta. But the fact is, we get the very same dollar per capita as Alberta and Saskatchewan get. So it wasn't as if there was, equalization money flowing into Newfoundland and Labrador, because we are not a recipient of that. But I am concerned about natural resource development and how globally competitive we are. And I want Alberta to be competitive, because that impacts Newfoundland and Labrador as well.
Any advice for the Prime Minister on managing a minority government?
We have a little chat at that. It's interesting that I'm here this week, because our House is not sitting this week, so you need to be close. But I still look at this, and I do believe that fundamental in all of this, that there's a group of people that sit in those chairs. They sit there as a privilege, not as a right, to represent Canadians in this particular case, no different than we would see in Newfoundland and Labrador. And when it comes down to doing the right things for all of Canada, I believe that the will is there and the courage is there to be able to do that. I'm very confident that he will do a good job in managing through a minority government.
With the dynamic right now, though, nationally, how tough is it for a smaller province like Newfoundland and Labrador and the other Atlantic provinces to get their issues and problems on the agenda when so much focus right now is on the prairies?
No issue for me. I've got to say that I've been very fortunate to have the Prime Minister for quite some time, as I have with other ministers, and I think some of that comes down to they don't get anything unexpected from me. I'll say in that room what I'll say outside. So I'm not coming out. I'm not looking to be showmanship here in any way. The Prime Minister knows my feelings about Newfoundland and Labrador. He certainly knows my feelings of where we fit in Canada. He understands the priorities. He's taken. Anytime I've reached out, he's been always there, as the ministers have been. So I can only speak to the way that we manage and our own relationship. So it was no different today. I had all the time that I needed to discuss our concerns.
On the flip side, do you walk into the Premier's meeting next week from a unique perspective, because you are one of the only Liberal premiers in the country? So do you feel some weight on you to telegraph what the Prime Minister might be hoping to get out of the meeting? I
walk in there as a Newfoundlander and Labradorian. I walk in there as a Canadian, and that's the position that I come from. And if I don't walk in there wearing any color shirt, I walk in there wearing a Canadian jersey with a Newfoundland and Labrador label on it.
Do you feel like you need to, in a sense, help sort of calm the waters that have really become choppy, especially out west?
I think there's a role of us. I've been. They tell me now I'm the second longest serving premier in the country, which I find that a little surreal some days. I jokingly told somebody the other day there's yogurt in our fridges longer than some premiers have been in the job. So, but nevertheless, I think that over the years and some of the challenges that I've had to deal with in our province, that I've gained a fair amount of experience of actually dealing with some uncertain situations and different personalities. So I think I can bring that kind of calm and cooling impact to the room. And I usually come prepared with, the facts to support the things that I say. And, when you look at it, it is really about that, and really dialing things down and talking about really who we are and why we're here. And that is about being Canadian. For me, it's about being a Newfoundland and Labrador and someone with a very proud heritage. And I just want to see this country survive.
Thank you.
Thank you.